Hi, and welcome to another edition of Legally Insane News. I'm your host, Kyle O'Donnell. Today, I am releasing the behind-the-scenes interview that I had with Bob Miller. Now, Bob Miller was active in the early days of Quartzsite when all of the upheaval was happening, and he had good insights. He was a little curious as to whether or not I was like some telemarketer or something, and then I had to kind of prove to him that I knew people through people, and they sent me to you, and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, no, I can understand it because anybody who has any history in Quartzsite, to the people that were targeted, and I believe Bob Miller might have been one of the people that were, you get a little skeptical. You get a little paranoid that somebody might be still trying maybe to get old, jabs in on some old beef. So in any case, he loosened up quite quickly and was extremely open about his opinions on what happened in Quartzsite. And you're able to not only, if you've watched the documentary, the Big Trouble in Little Quartzsite, which was recently released, you'll hear his voice. I don't have video of him, but you'll hear his voice discussing how, they discovered the nepotism, the fraud, the waste, the abuse, all the stuff that we're hearing about in politics right now was happening in Quartzsite under the microscope because it was a tiny town where nobody could hide. And he was one of those early characters who uncovered that corruption. So in his words, he's got full reign on this interview, and it's very interesting. He did apparently years worth of work trying to uncover this stuff, and the interview that I have with him is very telling about what he came up with. Now, I'm releasing half the interview publicly here on Rumble and YouTube and Twitter and everywhere else on my socials. For the full interview, it's extremely, extremely telling. It is free. Just head over to legallyinsanefilms.com and sign up for a free or a paid membership, and you'll have access to the full interview in its entirety, where they discuss corruption, nepotism, where the money went, how they got into it, how everybody gets wrapped up into these types of situations. It's not just telling, it's not just revealing, it's also a cautionary tale. It talks about what, if you infer more behind the, reading between the lines of what he says, it's kind of like, how do you deal with it in your own town? And if you're suffering in any way like they were at the time that I recorded this documentary, you'll take a good lesson or a good page from the book that Bob Miller wrote through his experiences. So here is that interview. Hope you enjoy, and stay tuned for more.
Hello.
Hi, I was trying to reach Mr. Bob Miller.
Who's this?
This is Kyle O'Donnell. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I was hoping to speak to Mr. Miller about his...
Yeah, I was expecting your call. Bill Mabbitt got a hold of me and let me know that he had conversation with you regarding video you're doing.
Right, yeah, I'm kind of doing something that covers the history of the town from the French rock miners and settlers all the way up to recent.
How long have you been in the area?
Well, I've been filming this documentary since February last year.
Okay. Well, I left Quartzsite I spent 18 years there, and I left 10 years ago.
Okay.
Returned to Boise. Just basically retired, and what's the theme of your video? Where are you headed with it?
Well, that's a very easy question to ask. Not quite so easy to answer. So I do long form journalism. And originally, when I arrived in Quartzsite, I was doing a travel and culture documentary about the nomadic movement of people like rebuilding buses and traveling around, and kind of stumbled on this crazy story that has kind of overtaken that doc. I could potentially finish that one with the footage that I've got, but I've just sort of dove headlong into this one once I found out the quirky types of things that went on there. So in that, I guess I'm saying that I'm making a 4-part documentary that covers. There's a lot of political contention there that definitely takes center stage toward the end of the series, and well, actually, it kind of has a vein throughout the entire series, but really, it's about establishing the notion of Wild West politics and why they sort of found a seat there and what kind of characters that they invite, and like it's a kind of a detailed response. I don't really have. I mean, you'd probably take a couple hours, but that's kind of like the topical.
Well, as you may know, I owned the Gem newspaper there for the better part of 18 years, and I did a considerable amount of coverage, if you will,
Right.
on the various strange behaviors of the police department and the city council.
Mm-hmm.
Which was basically a corrupt cabal from the get-go. And I'm working on a manuscript at the present time entitled "The Town That Should Have Never Been." Quartzsite was way back in the day was a bunch of retired seniors that would get together once a year and just dry camp there. There was no commercial, very little commercial structure there. And what they were doing was rock hounding. These were folks that were retired and they just wanted to get in a warmer place for the winter. And over the years, this thing grew. And it had, when I left there, it had a population year-round population of about 6,200. But during the winter, that swelled to 1.5 million with the influx of the snowbirds that would bring their RVs, and they would fill up all the, as you probably know, the BLM campgrounds and everything from Siloam to halfway to Parker.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I used to fly over it and take aerial photos of the thing, and all you could see was during January was the sea of tin roofs. All these RVs that are in there. But at any rate, Quartzsite was over the years, they started developing certain portions of it. Some businesses sprang up, and these businesses were, for the most part, 6 months businesses, because the only time there was enough traffic there for anyone to have any kind of business was during the winter months. And in April, prior to the 15th, the place emptied out because all the snowbirds went home to do their taxes. So the summers, you could fire a cannon down Main Street. There's nobody there. Plus the heat's 120 some days, and as you probably know. And over the years, I watched Quartzsite grow to the commercial part of it grow. And when Quartzsite was formed, there was no incorporated city or village there until 1990, I believe. It was incorporated, and it was incorporated by Richard Oldham, who got together with a bunch of folks, and they decided it was time to incorporate the town and get all the benefits that a town would have through articles of incorporation. But they overlooked the fact that there was no statutory provision for property tax there. And so they were totally reliant on sales taxes, okay? And they went ahead and they incorporated this thing, and they appointed Oldham as mayor. And I think he served 4.5 years, if I'm correct, as mayor. And over the years, the Quartzsite city administration and town government has just had one problem after another, as has their police department. And understood what Bill was telling me, you were kind of interested in the murder for hire plot between the two mayors, right?
Well, it sounds like you've actually been there throughout the entire most recent period that I'm interested in. Your time. You said you moved there around 1990 and then left in 2010.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that whole era. I'm missing a lot of interviews between 95 and '05 when in my opinion, I don't have anybody saying this, but based on what I can surmise from the kind of like the averaging of everybody's commentary, it sounds like the political contention really just grew between that era and then became public afterward when it could no longer really survive under the cloak of, new, like,
basically, yeah, it was pretty incredible. Under articles of incorporation, they were allowed to budget for a town manager and things of that nature. And over the years, the money just flew out of Quartzsite because they were electing people who had absolutely no background in business administration. They were put in there on a kind of a nepotism family this kind of thing. Political plums were handed to various people in the community and so forth. The murder for hire thing between Oldham and Rex Bird. Rex Bird was a well driller, and he operated a well drilling system there. And shortly after Oldham became mayor, he hired Rex Bird to drill a well for him. And Rex Bird drilled the well, and Oldham was dissatisfied with it. And over the years, this feud between Oldham and Bird grew. And to the point where at one point Rex Bird decided that he had been elected mayor. He followed Oldham was elected mayor. And during his tenure as mayor, this thing heated up between Oldham and Bird. Bird decided he wanted to have Oldham loft. So he hires a guy by the name of Bobby Bacon. And Bobby Bacon was kind of the bad boy in town. He was in constant trouble. And he hired, Rexburg hired Bobby Bacon to orchestrate a murder for hire plot, i.e. maybe be the hitman or hire a hitman to get the job done. And so word got out, Department of Public Safety, one of the detectives I knew down there, because I knew his brother real well, they decided to put a investigation together. And the way they did it was they got Oldham, took him out in the desert one day and made him look dead. They hung him upside down on a tarp, took his IDs and everything, and they photographed him. And when they got through, made the photographs available to this hitman, because they didn't know this was the Department of Public Safety doing this, see. And so Bobby Bacon, one day on a Saturday afternoon, decides that he's going to take the photograph and the evidence over to Rex Bird and collect $10,000. He's showing the job was done. And so, indeed he did, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, and not knowing that he was being followed by officers of the Arizona Department of Public Safety. And they observed Bobby Bacon coming out of Rex Bird's house Rex Bird was a welder, and he had a tube like the welding rods come in. And inside that tube, when they arrested him, was $10,000. When they stopped Bacon, it was $10,000 that he had been paid supposed murder of Oldham.
Right.
Well, they arrested Bobby Bacon, and shortly thereafter, they got a warrant and they went and arrested Rex Byrd. And in Arizona, murder for hire is punishable by life in prison. It's an automatic life sentence if you're convicted. And this thing went to trial, and it drew international news. We had correspondents from Great Britain there. I can remember. I covered the whole trial. And anyway, during the course of the trial, it was pointed out that the prosecution had hidden a very crucial witness, and the witness was Bobby Bacon's wife. And she had knowledge of all of this and would have offered testimony that would have not been favorable to Byrd. And it was disclosed that the prosecution was deliberately hiding this witness from trial. And the judge caught wind of it, and the Superior Court judge set the ruling aside for prosecutorial misconduct. And so Byrd, after serving about a year in jail, was free. He remained free until the time of his death. And I knew Rex Byrd very well. I knew Oldham very well. Of course, in a small town, everybody knows everybody. But that was kind of well, by Arizona standards, it was probably one of the major crimes of the decade, you know.
You say you knew them pretty well. Could you describe the characters of Oldham and then describe Byrd?
Well, Oldham was a very polished former car dealer. You know, he had a reputation. He was a slicko. You know, he had a reputation for really stiffing folks. You know, and well deserved. And he would operate kind of like Boss Hogg in the in the shadows, but he had people that would do his dirty work for him, you know, and he'd put them up to all these crazy things and send them out there to do it. And you got to looking into it, and you found out that Oldham was really behind it. Was who was behind it?
What types of things?
Byrd was just a rough, tough old boy that he's a very likable guy, but he was a well driller and a blue collar worker, you know, and he lifetime resident of Quartzsite. I knew his whole family, and Mike Denny, who was the chief detective in the Arizona Department of Public Safety. I played baseball with his brother, so I knew Mike pretty well. Mike told me, he said, it's not very often we arrest mayors. He says, we don't do a lot of mayor arresting.
Right.
So, anyway, that was one of the, but Rex Byrd was as I said, he was just a tough old boy, kind of a likable kind of guy, you know. He was a guy that got things done as mayor. I'll tell you, he rolled up his sleeves and got some things done. But Quartzsite has had a history of hiring town managers and people at $100,000 a year plus that they could no way afford. And just before I left, maybe a couple of years before I left, the Arizona communities in Arizona, each one incorporated community, has to join a public insurance risk pool. Okay, and this risk pool is a fund that's set aside for lawsuits and that kind of thing. They're all usually handled out of the public risk pool. It's an insurance policy for the town, and just before I left, the town council's membership in the Arizona Public Risk Pool was canceled because they had too many lawsuits piling up. They had lawsuits from, I don't know if you heard about the dog lady, her last name was Jones, and
Yeah.
she got crosswise with the town. She was a dog breeder and trainer, and she had a cadre of dogs way back in the day, and the dog catcher from Parker came up and insisted that he wanted to go through her kennels, and she said, "Well, no, not without a warrant." And so he says, "Well, I don't need a warrant." And he went and got this police officer, Javier, this little Mexican police officer. Javier came over and he told her, "Well, you allow this gentleman access, or I'm going to arrest you, take you down to Parker, and lock you up." So she reluctantly gave in, which automatically set off a bell in the back of my head. Here we have a warrantless search and a violation of her Fourth Amendment rights under the guise of arresting her if she refused. So the headline in the paper was, woman victimized by warrantless search. Okay? And needless to say, that the police department didn't like that very much. So they started targeting me. They would follow me around and pull me over for DUI. They tried to catch me with a DUI. I have never had a DUI in my life because I don't drink and drive. I seldom ever drink anyway. And anyway, they kept pulling this. And so one day I cornered the police chief in his office, and I told him, "Sit down here, son. You and me are going to have a talk." And I told him, I said, "You're about the fifth police chief that's come to town, and you all come here with a big story of where you've been and all the wonderful things you've done. And generally, we kind of live and let live as long as you don't hassle anybody. But it's come to my attention through some of the officers that have shared with me your desire to have me, you're sicking them on me to have me arrested for DUI if they can possibly do it. And I'm here to tell you, you're not the first one that's been up to that, nor you'll probably be the last. But I'm going to tell you that if you keep it up, you're going to find yourself knee-deep in a lawsuit. So let's just have a gentleman's agreement between the two of us. And the agreement is that you have a date for the dance. That's the good news. The bad news is I'm your chaperone." And he didn't like that very much either. So that gives you some idea of my relationship with the police department. I could write a whole book on things the police department did. They raided a house one night with an old guy who was near his deathbed. They threw a smoke bomb in and one of these flashbang things, and went in and got him out at 2 o'clock in the morning. Come to find out, they had the wrong house. It was the house next door they should have been after.
Looks like they woke up.
This kind of thing went on all the time with that police department. And I've written several articles, I can't even tell you how many, about the fact that not only should the town have never been incorporated, but the police department should have never happened either. It should have contracted that out to La Paz County, who was more than willing to do it and do it professionally. But oh no, they wanted control. They used the police department as a hammer for anyone that dared to question them, So that's how this cabal thing got going.
So,
and,
okay.
Well, it picked up steam over the years, and the town became more contentious over the years because you have issues like we need $5 million to upgrade our sewer system, and we needed another 100,000 to budget for a new town manager when the going rate was about 40. You know, that, there were all of these kinds of things where the town was basically living well beyond its means, and Quartzsite became known as recall heaven for Arizona. Every 6 months or so, there was a recall election where they'd get together and try and recall some of the council people.
Now, you mentioned that the town was, I guess, grabbing lots of money. How did that start, and where did the money go?
Well, it started when they incorporated the town, and they had the ability to budget hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the money all went to salaries for people like police chiefs and judges and all kinds of political plums that they appointed. Well, one guy told me, he said, the money's flying out of here, which is true. Quartzsite was a magnet for every kind of character you could imagine. I remember they hired a guy from Paris, California for town manager. This guy's name was Joe Malloy. And Mr. Malloy came to town, and he had been in the job probably a month. And my phone was ringing off the hook from the girls at town hall saying that they wanted this guy gone because he was an idiot. He was threatening everybody in town hall from the clerk on down. And so they piqued my curiosity, and I knew he came from Paris, California, which is not that far from Quartzsite, by the way. And I knew the folks that ran the Paris Progress News. So I got a hold of them, and they said, oh, yeah, Mr. Malloy, he was quite a character. He said, we fired him here, and then he turned around and sued the town. Well, I had his employment application for Quartzsite, and it said that he just retired. He forgot to mention the fact that he was fired, and not only was he fired, but he turned around and unsuccessfully attempted to sue the city of Paris. So I kept all this documentation. I had the newspaper articles and everything. I had them in my briefcase. And one night during the call to the public, after he had exhibited some of his great oratorical talents, I ascended to the podium with my briefcase, and he was sitting behind the council table next to the town lawyer. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, Mr. Malloy, is there something perhaps that you haven't shared with us about your employment and how you happened to arrive here in Quartzsite? And I could see him get a death grip on the table. He looked at me, if looks could kill, I'd have been dead. And he says, oh no, he says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, all right, let's show you the evidence. So I reached in my briefcase and I had all these newspaper clippings. Okay, I held them up and I said, you recognize these? These are out of the Paris Progress News, which documents the fact that you were fired there, and contrary to what you put on your employment application here. And not only that, you unsuccessfully sued the town of Quartzsite, or the town of Paris. So is there anything else you might like to share with us tonight? Huh. No, there wasn't. And when he left, he walked in the back room of the town attorney. I don't know whether they were having a pretty interesting conversation of sorts, I guess. That's another thing they did. They always had their share of back office meetings where the public was. I can't tell you how many times we had them cited for violation of public meeting laws. Almost ongoing.
So, you know, you're kind of leaning toward the idea that there was some measure of ineptness involved in why they were. Absolutely.
They had an absolute cabal. Absolutely.
So you don't think any of that stuff was intentional, huh?
Of course it was intentional.
Well, that would, I guess what I'm asking is if it's ineptness, it kind of pulls it away from intentional. did they just know what they were doing and do it anyway, or did they not know what they were doing and just sort of kept going once they?
Combination of both. But yeah, basically they knew what they were doing and tried to cover it up. And you know, there's an old saying, and I found it to be very true. The first the act of a crime is compounded by the cover-up. First you have the crime, and then you have the cover-up. The cover-up's usually a lot more interesting than the crime, and that's what was going on there. But these guys were absolutely corrupt, all of
them. And what type of corruption are you referring to? I mean, were they taking money? Were they?
Yeah, they were taking money and appropriating it for themselves, and nepotism, hiring their relatives illegally, and squandering the money that they had, that budget. They bought some of the craziest things you can imagine, but violating the public meeting laws, they did more business behind closed doors than they did in public. So, yeah, there was as I said, I've got this manuscript that I'm working on, and when I get it finished, I'll send you a copy of it. But it's the beginning of a book, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that was a very interesting number of years for me there, and they didn't like my paper much. It sold very well, by the way. I marketed it for $1 an issue, and people stood in line to buy it.
Was it affiliated with any person or business in town?
Just me. I was the sole owner.
Yeah. Was it turned over to anybody when you left?
I don't know whatever happened to it. I left my file cabinets there with a lady that had sued the town, and she was thinking about starting a paper. I don't know what she ever did, you know.
You're talking about Jade.
Yeah, Jade.
Yeah, she started a paper that really kind of took off a lot like kind of like what you're saying.
She's no longer there?
No, I'm saying the paper took off a lot like yours did, and then kind of it created a rivalry between her paper and the paper I think that Busby had, or
yeah, probably,
yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. Can you? Okay. How is it that you know that the town was? I'm gonna call it embezzling money, and how did you find out?
Embezzling. It was they would appropriate money without regard to the statutes. Okay, they would appropriate it for this, that, or the other. They wanted to buy this, or they wanted to buy that, or they wanted to give the town manager or the police chief an outrageous raise, you know. And then they got into lawsuits, and they were appropriating money for lawsuits. And when the Arizona Public Risk Pool would no longer back them, and they said you're on your own with these lawsuits, the money continued to fly out of there. You know, they had a police chief. This guy had an immediate dislike for me because I found out that he had a story when he came to town. He hadn't even been certified as a police officer. And he pulled me over one day when I was going into McDonald's and started to give me a bunch of horsemen about nothing. And I just set him straight right then and there. I said, well, let me tell you something. You're not even certified, and I happen to know that, so you have no business pulling anybody over at this point. And you can imagine how that set with him. And he was there for quite a while, and he'd follow me around and flip me the bird as he went by, you know. And he'd do all this crazy. The guy was half nutty. And then, anyway, one day he takes his patrol car. He had an unmarked patrol car, and he goes over to the city shop. The city shop does all the maintenance on all the vehicles, police cars, everything. And he takes this police car in to have it worked on. And while he's in there, he gets into the discussion. It started out he and one of the mechanics were horsing around. And the mechanic is a guy by the name of Jose Marquez, who I also knew pretty well. And during the course of this conversation, Marquez apparently called Gil, the police officer, Oaxaco. Or the police officer called him a Oaxaco. That's what happened. And Marquez says, "Well, you can't do that. I'll whip your ass." And the police chief reached down and the console of his car, pulled up a loaded Glock and aimed it at him and said, "Not until you get past this." Now, all of this was observed by another city employee who was up in the loft overseeing it. They had a loft over the shop. And this guy gave us a complete sworn affidavit on what happened, okay? And I took the thing to Busby and I said, "Look, this is something you guys really need to take a look at." And anyway, Jim Lloyd and I got together. We decided that something ought to be done about this before this guy really hurts somebody. So Marquez decided that we put Marquez in touch with a guy by the name of Harvey Jackson. Harvey's a lawyer over in Lake Havasu, and a pretty damn good one. I ran a RV park there on the side for a while, and I used him for eviction, so I knew Harvey. And we got Harvey to represent Marquez, and he took him to the mat on this, threatening him with a firearm. And it was settled out of court for, I think it was $150,000 thereabouts. And that's just one example of the atrocities this police department engaged in.
Now, I met Chief Gilbert, or ex-Chief Gilbert, I should say. I met Jeff at a hearing. Actually, it was a trial of a guy named Mike Roth, and he was kind of there to, in my opinion, smirk when Roth got convicted. Unfortunately, that hung jury did not give him the smirk he wanted, and but I talked with him out front for a little while, and he was talking about how he's going to release a book about his hero times, crusading justice there in Quartzsite.
Oh yeah, and I'll support him on that. You couldn't find a better man for the protection of civil liberties and justice, or how to violate them. He's an expert on violating people's constitutional rights, and he damn well should have written a book about it.
Well, he seemed to have the opposing opinion, but yeah.
Yep, he was. Jeff was a real corker. Then, after he was done with police chief, his $100,000 a year thing went bye-bye. He decided he wanted to be the judge. So he put in an application to be the justice,
Justice of the peace?
Yeah, justice of the peace. And the only thing he knew about the law was how to violate it. I guess he finally left town. I heard he finally left town.
He's back, actually. Well, that's why I think he showed up there. He actually, when he left, he went to an Indian tribe. He became a chief in the Indian tribe up in Washington.
Yeah.
Well, Washington State is what I was saying. And
I think he went to Parker first, and then probably. Yeah, he was a real character. He had some troubles. I did a background on him one time, and he came to Quartzsite, or came to Arizona from Kentucky, and he'd had some problems in Kentucky prior to that. I don't know what they all were, but I can't recall, but there was something in Kentucky that he had some shadows over there before he ever came to Quartzsite. And that was another guy. He was, he was given a vote of no confidence by his officers. You knew about that, right?
Yeah. I've interviewed Chief Ponce about that and a couple other people.
How's Ponce doing? Is he still there? Or?
He is. He's actually running for sheriff now.
I think Ponce was a pretty decent guy. I knew him pretty well.
Yeah, everything everybody else has told me about him, the town has he the town has him in good confidence, but they don't necessarily like the idea that he's planning on leaving. You know.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. He was offered a job when I was there with the California Highway Patrol. I don't know why he didn't take it, because it sure paid a lot more money than he was getting there. But you know,
I think something about many children needing food.
Oh, yeah. Well, that could be. I don't know. But, anyway. They hired another guy who was very interesting. I got to know him pretty well. He was Hispanic, came from old Mexico, young guy. And this guy had played professional baseball in the Mexican League, and he was a pretty damn good ball player. And I got to know him pretty well. And he's one of the guys that shared information with me that Gilbert was trying to set me up for a DUI, you know.
Yeah. He was on the police force at the time?
Yeah.
It's not Villafana, is it?
Huh?
It's not Villafana, is it?
No. No, I don't know what Villafania's story is. He was kind of a strange cat. I don't know what's going on with him.
All right, so we have reached the halfway mark in this episode of Legally Insane News. To get the full episode, head over to legallyinsanefilms.com or legallyinsanenews.com and sign up for a free or paid subscription, whatever suits your interests, to access the full version of this and other episodes of behind-the-scenes interviews from Big Trouble in Little Quartzsite. I also have the actual film, the director's cut, a whole boatload of behind-the-scenes videos with the mayor, Mike Roth, all of the big players. I also have articles that I release from my research in the post-Liberty movement, and there's just a ton of stuff there. Whatever you're into. If you're a reader, there's a tier just for the articles. If you like audio, like podcasts and behind-the-scenes stuff, there's a middle tier for you guys. And if you like the videos, the behind-the-scenes outtakes and extras, all of the documentaries that I work on, access to the case files and the investigations that I have upcoming, all of that stuff is reserved for my upper tier members. And all of that is available at legallyinsanenews.com. If you're on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, or Instagram, follow me at Kyle O'Donnell, and that's CYLE ODONNELL, Kyle O'Donnell. Thanks so much for supporting this channel.